It's one of them fish that just sort of piques your interest. The Blue Lagoon is like, it sounds quite sort of special. You know, it looked spectacular with it, you know, white chalk cliffs. It sort of rolled, and I sort of thought, oh, was that? I just saw like a linear. Although you're always hoping for it, do you really expect it to happen in the way that it did? It's always like a bit of a end of an era sort of feeling to it, you know, although you're still sort of blown away by it all, it's great that it's happened. So I first saw this fish, a photo of this fish on social media a few years back actually, because a couple of my mates had fished it previously, maybe 4 or 5 years prior, and it's sort of one of those fish that when you see it, it looks quite unique in its appearance, the scale pattern, stuff like that, and yeah, it's one of them fish that just sort of piques your interest. Yeah, I think like most of us do, you see that fish, you do a little bit of delving, you put it on a little short list, you know, of a possible future, capture, if you like, and a future adventure. And I put it on a little short list and sort of forgot about it really for a couple of years. It didn't really sharpen the socials much, so it was one of them ones that, you know, was a little bit more sort of harder to catch or didn't come out as often. So yeah, for me it was sort of earmarked, put to one side, and it wasn't until November of 2020 when I got a ticket for the place. I'd done a bit of inquiring and found out there was, you know, a small waiting list, but you could certainly get in within a year or so. So I grabbed the ticket in November, which is when the ticket starts, which is an unusual time for the tickets to start, but I'd never actually seen the lake. So I took a ticket on the opportunity of me possibly fishing it that season or the next, depending on what I was doing currently in my angling. And yeah, so it just so happened that I think it was around December, I said to my missus, do you fancy going for a little walk around the lake I just got a ticket for? And yeah, it was quite a dreary old night really, but we headed up here at about 3:30, 4 o'clock in the evening, and it was quite a foggy evening actually, I remember, and we arrived and I remember pulling in through the gate and just thinking, this is dreary, you know. And as I approached the lake down the sort of beaten up old track, I was sort of already in doubt, as thinking, oh Christ, you know, it's not quite what I sort of hoped it might be, because the Blue Lagoon is like, it sounds quite sort of special. And obviously having a look online and seeing photos of the lake itself, you know, it looked spectacular with it, you know, white chalk cliffs and everything else. So I actually remember coming through the gate and I couldn't see the lake. It was that much, you know, it's that much fog, and it was just about getting dark. So we had a quick scoot round and see a couple of people down here fishing, even in December. And yeah, but it was enough, you know, just to see the lake where the fish resides, and yeah, just sort of got a quick feel for the place really. I then shelved it. I think we went into lockdown, or second lockdown possibly. So my plans were sort of hatched to sort of start in the spring. But what actually occurred that winter was there was a little bit of commotion about whether the otters had been on here, and you know, a few sort of rumours went round that potentially the otters had been on here and it might have taken a couple of the fish away, you know, killed them. So yeah, it was always a bit of uncertainty going into that spring, and I think for that reason it was quite quiet. So we started on here back in April. It was quite a wet spring, and it wasn't very spring-like that year. In fact, I think we had snow late March, early April. So I decided to yeah, just get down here all the same and just get going. So first trip down, it was yeah, it's always sort of daunting, but yeah, sort of daunting, but not, you know, arriving to a new lake and not really knowing what to expect really. It was the first time I'd sort of seen it in the daylight, and yeah, like, I mean, it's, you know, 23 acres. It's a big old pit. It's quite windswept. It's quite open, low stock, very deep. You know, 45 foot in the middle. I mean, you'd say the shallows are like 20 foot if you like. So it gives you an idea of sort of the depth. Very, very snaggy out there. I mean, there's all sorts of things that were left back from the quarry days, like bogies, you know, big metal carts with wheels on them. There's a crane out there. There's a few huts out in the middle. You know, it's got everything. And as you can see, you've got the buoys, sailors, swimmers, divers. Yeah, there's a lot of obstacles along the way, and it was it was just getting my head around that side of the fishing, you know, being interrupted by the swimmers and the sailors. But I mean, sometimes you could use them to your advantage, you know. So yeah, the first couple of sessions were just spent just getting your head around the depths really, and yeah, just sort of working out opportunities and, you know, keeping on your toes. I spent a lot of time walking. You often find in these deep pits that the fish move around, you know, a lot. Because it's deep, they don't get the chance to investigate the bottom as they're going from A to B. And generally, you know, you'll turn up and find you know, a handful of fish up one end, and by the time you walk round the other side, you're looking over, you know, the same fish you've just seen 400 yards away. And you know, they travel that quick as well, especially if the sun was up. You know, they're almost solar powered, so you found on those sunny days you can find them, you know, all over the gaff. So yeah, it was a bit of a challenge really. It was on that sort of first few sessions you just sort of get a feel for the place, and you realise that yeah, it might not be as straightforward as you had hoped, or you know, just different to what you expected. But the challenge was there, and I was up for it. So yeah, you just sort of crack on, and you know, there's plenty of people fishing it. You know, there's a handful of sort of local guys that were fishing it, and then there was a few sort of further afield that sort of came in to fish it as well. But it was in that sort of April time where it came out, you know, and it probably received a lot more press than you'd usually expect. So the lake naturally got busier, and the fact, you know, it made it through the winter and had a few wall wounds to show. But yeah, it was there, it was looking good, and yeah, the sort of adventure was on. So I then, you know, racked up a few nights, maybe 20 nights, various sightings of fish, you know, in areas that, you know, I quite fancied I might be able to catch it from. But I remember thinking that maybe due to the depths, you know, zigs might be the way forward. I spent a lot of time in them upper layers, but ultimately I wanted to catch it, you know, my way. I spent a lot of time boilie fishing and, you know, fishing hinges and whatnot. So yeah, I sort of quite stubborn sometimes, and you want to catch it, you know, on your terms, which not always the best thing to do, but yeah, I'm quite a stubborn angler in that respect. So I was looking for those areas that I thought I could present a bait, and that the fish, you know, regularly visited. So that's why it was important to sort of, you know, keep on your toes and keep looking around, put them puzzle pieces together along the way. So it was about 20 nights in that I had my first fish, which was the second largest in here at 30 pounds, stunning little linear, a lovely little sort of backup fish if you like. And you know, the first one out of the lake is always special, and it sort of makes you feel like, yeah, you know, I can catch this is doable. But yeah, 20 nights, you know, it's a long time, it's a lot of blanking, but you know, these low stock pits are like that, and I think if you can get your head around that and just sort of get stuck in, put them puzzle pieces together, you can usually get something going. I'd earmarked a couple of swims, so what I did was, first few sessions I was sort of leading around, finding good areas, you know, that we could present a bait. Generally the areas that I'd see them showing either in first light, you know, or last light, because that seemed to be where they were, you know, the period of time they were feeding. And one of them just happened to be swim behind me, and the other one, which was on the back of the southwesterlies, was over there. It was a nice sort of feeling, get my first one under my belt, and yeah, I had a bit of a buzz off that for a while, to be fair. And things were slowly sort of falling into place. I think the big one come out shortly after that. And yeah, that year it was odd because it actually came out on a zig and on a floater. So you start wondering whether maybe you should be concentrating more in the upper layers, you know. But it was all down to the weather. If it was sunny, the fish were up, you know, well up. And if it wasn't, you didn't really see them a lot, you know, because they were down in the deeps. So I spent a lot of time concentrating on a certain area, and yeah, give them some bait every now and again. You know, if I was fishing one swim, I'd bait the other, and vice versa. And then I probably went another few weeks, I think, before the next carp showed up, which was in my second sort of marked swim, if you like. I fished the swims depending on what winds we had, really. And where I was confident that I could get a bite from. You know, fishing in 45 foot of water, it's great if they're showing over it, but are they really feeding in there? And that was my theory behind it, you know. So I was just fishing the shallower water, which is 20 to 26 foot roughly. But you know, a uniform bottom. It's quite weedy out there, so it was yeah, it was a sort of tough task finding somewhere that was presentable, that, you know, when you brought your rigs in, they didn't stink because it's covered in onion weed, so, and that stuff, not nice. So I wasn't happy presenting in that. So I found a couple of small areas, concentrated on them, and ended up having a fish off of each area. And then shortly after that, I think we were heading into early autumn. The lake did get busier. The pressure was on. You always felt like a bit of tension when it was due. People used to up their game. There was a handful of anglers that were really on it. So you always felt like you're competing, like you are in most lakes. When you've got a special sort of fish like that swimming around. And so yeah, we went into that autumn, and I had 2 fish under my belt. I was happy. Felt like it was catchable and that I could do it. But yeah, it weren't meant to be that autumn. I think a guy from up north had it. He'd put a real amount of effort in and deserved it, and he had it sort of late autumn. So I decided that although these big mirrors do make an appearance over the winter, even more so in a deep lake, I decided that I'd probably shelve it over the winter, go and get some bites, chill out, and then sort of regain hopefully where I'd left off in the spring, with the knowledge that I had from the previous year. Like I say, I keep on saying this term like puzzle pieces. To me, I do that on every lake. It's sort of building up these little bits of information that ultimately will hopefully lead you to capturing the fish you want. So I'd initially spent about 4 months. So we did probably November, December, January, February, winter-wise on there, and on another little pit, about an hour down the road. And I was quite into that pit, so I decided to sort of stay on there and just sort of keep my ear to the ground as to what was going on down here. I sort of was gagging to get back, but at the same time I was sort of quite happy where I was, so I was really torn. And I think I got a call from someone saying that it had done its sort of spring capture. So I knew after that, chances are it would quieten down a bit. And it did quieten down a little bit. And the good thing about it was it had actually come out over 50 pounds. So the previous captures the year before, probably due to the otter, carrying a bit of war wounds and that, it ended up not doing that 50-pound barrier that year. Close to it. But the first capture of this spring, it was 50 pounds. So I thought, that's a good weight. The fish was looking good. The otters clearly hadn't been there all winter. So I think 3 weeks after that was long enough for me to get back down here and get cracking. And yeah, I was buzzed. So I got back second week in May. Yeah, I was keen. I'm not going to lie. I was like, I said to myself, right, up at first light, keep your eyes peeled, keep on your toes. And I was quite sort of obsessed, I suppose, in a way. I was happy to be back and raring to go. So I spent a few times on that first session moving. Actually, I moved 3 or 4 times a session because I was seeing the fish showing at certain areas, certain times of the day, and you can get really sucked into that on here. When they're moving that quickly, it's very easy to think, oh, I'm in the wrong place, oh, I need to be here. And so I spent a lot of time sort of jumping around those first sort of 4, 5, 6 nights. But I quickly realised that it was showing in that same area where I'd been concentrating in the mornings. Every morning, it was almost like clockwork. Between 4:30 and 6:30, I knew that I'd see that big and show. And it had a real unique way of showing, because a lot of the fish in here, I know there's only, it's low stock. This fish just seemed to, it spent a lot of time out of the water when it showed, so it'd almost sort of shuffle out, and you'd always see it because you had enough time to see it. The other fish sort of head poked and just sort of went straight back under. But that big, and it was amazing to see that 50 sort of pounder shuffling its weight through the surface, and it was quite unique in the way it showed. And it almost, it's like you jump up, you just have to be almost nearer it. You approach closer to the bank just so you can get that little bit nearer to it. And sometimes, it would show, quite far out, but generally it would show within a certain area, certain depth as well, I found. So I decided I needed to get back in those areas and just keep the bait trickling in and just stick to the plan, really. I think sometimes when you've got a plan in your head, it's really easy to sort of deviate from it, but you've got to think about the information you've learnt from the year before, and that was important to me. I knew the areas, I knew I could catch from them, and if I'm honest, and a few of the lads will say this, that I always knew that I'd sort of, or hoped, or sort of knew that I'd catch it from this area, fishing this way, and that's exactly what happened. So I think it had been seen quite a few times the week leading up to the end of May. And you always sort of knew that the more you saw it, the the better chance of it, you know, coming out. It was, you know, the tension was on. It had been 6-7 weeks since it had been out. And I remember arriving one morning and just remember waiting for that southwesterly wind to sort of swing in, and then it'd be in my favour for sort of getting in my swim, if you like, you know, my area. We all have these sort of favourite areas and swims we sort of pick. And you do pre-pick them sometimes, rightly or wrongly, but sometimes you just know where you need to be based on, you know, what you've learned over the last sort of 6-12 months, whatever it may be. And yeah, I remember turning up and noticing there was 3 or 4 anglers on, and the wind had swung, and yeah, you know, rightly so. People, you know, there's a couple of lads on the new big wind, and I sat a couple of swims up actually, so I could look out on the same area, but knew I wasn't too far from where they would be. And one of the lads actually vacated the swim, which was a couple up, but it meant that, you know, we weren't fishing the same area as such. We weren't encroaching on each other's space, but he left the next morning. And that same evening, the night before, and the next morning, I'd seen the big and show over the same area I've been concentrating on for the last sort of 3-4 weeks. And yeah, I thought, this is it. You know, there's a real good chance. And I remember him packing up in the rain, and I was just thinking, you know, should I wait? Should I go around there? You know, are they going to move? Is the wind going to swing? And yeah, I just made the decision: get done, get packed down. It was raining. He drove out. I threw the gear in the back of the van, and yeah, just sort of headed round to where I knew I needed to be, which was just there. And headed round, found, yeah, just sort of very, very straightforward really for me. It was, I clipped up a couple of spots, you know, I'd had fish off both spots, and I proceeded just to go easy on the bait. I'd baited it the previous week, not a lot. I mean, I'd always use a stick a few sort of 16s out, 18s out. I remember going to that evening feeling really confident. I was on the phone to a mate of mine saying, you know, it's shown over me, which isn't that uncommon in here. You know, you do see it showing a lot due to the depths. And yeah, it was, I just know, I mean, looking back now, I think, I don't know whether I'm just saying this because that's just how I felt, but I felt like, yeah, this, you know, this could be it. It's a good chance. It hasn't been out for a while. It's showing a lot. I'm in a good spot, you know, the wind's right, the weather's right, everything sort of just fell into place. And I remember putting them rigs out and thinking, I want them drops to be the best I can get, you know. 2 casts on the right, took me 2 or 3 casts on the left, but when that one went down, you sort of got a good feeling. But I was really anticipating that night that the divers would come out, as they quite often did on here, on, you know, a couple of evenings a week and one morning a week, and they generally come out like first light and last light. And it really made it a bit of an issue because you never knew if you were going to be sort of come over your area or head out towards the right into the deep. So I was really nervous that night that when the divers turned up, I'd sit out there in my waders, sort of just, you know, anticipating which way they were going to head. As you see the big plumes of bubbles, because you obviously can't see them. They're, you know, they're 20, 30 foot down. Yeah, it just so happened I didn't have to reel in straight away that night, and they'd probably been out in the water about 10 minutes, and I received a couple of bleeps on my left down rod, and you know, you sort of startle up. You don't get many sort of liners in here, and you're all on edge. It's either all or nothing on here. You know, it either screams off, or you know, you don't get nothing. You know, there's hardly any tench. There's a couple of catfish, and I knew that something was in the area, and it wasn't the divers. So yeah, about 10 minutes after that, I received, you know, quite a big fish bite. It sort of, I remember the bobbin just sort of, after the couple of bleeps, it sort of just pulled right up tight, and in, you know, on a tight clutch, it's slowly ticking away. Yeah, you know, straight into it. I remember faffing around with my waders, and out in front of me, in between where I was fishing, there's like the divers use these platforms for sort of changing their tanks and whatnot. And I remember just thinking, you know, I need to get it up and over that real quick. So I was sort of pumping back and walking back, and I was just slowly bringing the fish to the shelf here, the first shelf, and it's quite a steep shelf which is sort of covered in weed. And just as I was bringing it up, you know, you're just about to see maybe the head or the top of the leg core or whatever, and then the hook pulled, and I was gutted. Like, you know, that feeling of dread. I feel it now actually, just like how I felt. Like, it was just this almost sick feeling. You know, it felt big. It's a 50-pound fish. Well, was it that? What was it? I didn't see it. it was a typical bigger fish bite in my opinion. And I was gutted. I remember phoning a mate and I felt sick. In the back of my mind, I didn't know what it was, And I remember phoning my friend up and we were having a chat, and you give me a little pep talk, didn't you? And he said, well, the best case scenario is that you have it in the morning sort of thing, and it hasn't got another hook pool in it, another hook hold in it. And, that's the only scenario you can wish for. Because if you have lost it, chances are, it's going to be a couple of weeks until you might get another opportunity. So I went to sleep that night and I was a little bit disappointed, if I'm honest. And you sort of think, have I fluffed a chance of catching that carp? Got my head down that night. It took a while to get my head down actually. And true to form, 3:45 I was up just before first light, waiting for that sun to rise. And you got some spectacular sunrises on here. And that morning was a little bit, not unlike this to be fair, a little bit of cloud cover and the sun came up and true to form, 4:30. Fish showed out there. Didn't see which one it was, but I assumed it wasn't a big one because it wasn't out of the water for long enough. And then shortly after that, about 20 yards behind where I was fishing, she shuffled out and just sort of, not as long as usual, just, a couple of seconds back down. I sat there and I just thought, right, this is good, this is really good. And just at that point, first light, I saw a friend of mine come in, Nick the cabbie, see his black cab turn up, looked over and you just think, he's going to know I'm over here. I know what he's thinking. He's going to try and get over here as well. But anyway, Nick come down and had a chat with me. It was early. We used to quite often just sit there, chew the fat. And I was obviously due to pack up that morning. Usually around sort of 9, half 9, I'd get out of here to go to work. And he came around and sat down. And I didn't tell him that I'd lost one the night before because I was still sort of a bit beaten up by it. But also it was sort of, didn't really need saying at the same time. But I felt bad, but quite often you keep things to yourself sometimes, And I remember sitting there that morning and we see a couple of sort of occurrences out there, which were obviously the other fish that was showing that grassy was about as well. And I think it was coming to about 9:10 and I was getting itchy. Nick wanted to set up a couple of swims up, so I started packing down. And just as I was packing down, I think I'd had everything down bar the bed chair and I received, just like the night before, these two sort of 2 up, 2 down, a nice little liner. And I knew then it was almost like it mimicked what it'd done the night before. I thought, this is good. And Nick looked at me and I looked at him and I thought, I didn't really, neither of us said anything. We went a bit quiet because I know it sounds bizarre, a liner, but it doesn't often happen on here, and it's a good sign. So I remember sitting there and Nick looked at me, I looked at him, and nothing was said about it. Both went a bit quiet and didn't really say anything. And I phoned my missus up and said, look, I'm due to leave in about 5-10 minutes. I said, but I'm going to give it another hour. I said, it looks too good. Everything's just sort of spot on. And deep down I was thinking, that's very similar to what happened last night. So I sat there and I don't even think she'd replied to my message to her. And the bobbin smacked into the blank and I was away, very conscious of the fact that I'd lost the fish the night before. I was straight into my waders and you have a bit of a faff around, you're trying to get your waders on, and I sort of headed out to meet what I hoped was a decent carp, and I knew that because of the one I'd lost the night before that I'd need to sort of get out a little bit more, get a bit higher, maybe sort of meet it at the drop off, because it's only 6 foot out there, you can wade all the way up to at least your chest, as far out as you dare. And I got about a few yards out and I thought, I haven't got the net, so I got Nick to throw me the net. And I remember walking out and it went a bit quiet. Obviously my legs are going, and just as I was sort of leaning up to it, I knew that I'd got it over the initial snag, the platform I was talking about where the divers used to use. And I managed to get it all the way up to that drop off, and the whole time I'm just thinking, oh, just don't come off. And just as it came up to the top of that drop off, Nick was standing behind me and it sort of rolled, and I sort of thought, oh, was that? I just saw like a linear pattern, but obviously the other linear is 30 pounds, and I know there's a big difference in the weight, but it was just that too far out to really see what it was. And as I edged it sort of nearer and nearer, it did it again. But this time it's, real unique. It's got a small head, big long body, quite lean. It's not a fat fish. It's a lean fish. And yeah, I knew then, and I was like, right, I need to meet this right at the end of that drop off. So yeah, panicked, went out there, and just remember, just sort of, you know, it's like, just get in the net, just get in that net. And yeah, pulled it straight over the draw cord, and I just turned around to Nick and absolutely, like, you know, just let out a big scream and big cry of sort of elation, really. And yeah, it was mental. It was all a bit of a blur after that, a real blur. Yeah, crazy time, just how everything just sort of falls into place, just like that, you know. Almost in a bit of shock as well, that it happened the way it happened. And yeah, although you're always hoping for it, do you really expect it to happen in the way that it did? And it just panned out that it was exactly how I thought I might catch it, you know, from this area, and, you know, the way I wanted to catch it. And yeah, what a morning that was. It was really good, really, really exciting. And just thinking back to it now, it was, yeah, still a bit of a blur, really. I think it quite often is. But yeah, that's it, job done, and called a few of the lads down and done some photos and video and whatnot, and shared in the moment with a few friends. It was nice, real sort of, I don't know, it's always like a bit of a end of an era sort of feeling to it, you know. Although you're still sort of blown away by it all, it's great that it's happened. And yeah, to weigh that fish, to see it, you know, in the sling, and then I couldn't even wait for the guys to come down, actually. I just had to weigh it. I kept on looking in, you know, you're standing out there looking in the net thinking, oh, okay, that looks good, yeah, she looks healthy, you know, she looks big. You know, me and Nick both agreed that she looked, you know, real good and real big. And I think we weighed her, transferred her over to the sling, and she went 51.9. So yeah, PB for me, first UK 50 from a low stock pit. Yeah, a real challenge of a lake, and yeah, just sitting here now, you know, yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing that your plan sort of plays out, really. Yeah, and the rest is all documented on your video. But yeah, it's just a great time, great place to be, some great guys, and it's always quite sad when you know, leave a lake, because you have that one last look and sort of know you ain't going to come back. And I do miss the place, you know. But yeah, that was it for me. That was me done, job done.
Get ready if you're ready, mate. You knew she would be, didn't you?
Oh, look at that.
Incredible, man. What a crowd. Is that a PB, Tom?
Yeah, mate.
A bucket of water, guys?
Just there.
You shouldn't have said that's just there.
No, the water's just there.
Yeah, it's going to end up.
Yeah.
Look at the size of that.
Mate, even if you are going home.
Oh, sorry. I just realised what you meant. Mine's a bit lost.
Some fish in it.
What a buzz.
Go on, Tom.
Oh, mate, made up.
Look at it. What a carp.
Oh,
Have a look at its mouth like this.
Ready?
Yeah, mate. Mate. You all go there. You good?
Yeah.
Yeah, these are looking nice, mate. You can get the tail up a touch, mate. She's straight, mate, yeah.
Tom, bring our tail out a little bit if you can.
You ain't got guns on me, bro.
There we go, lovely. Hold her there, Tom, that's nice, mate.
Straight?
Yeah, she's good, mate. We'll get in the middle there, Lance, get some nice vlogging footage there, mate. That's nice. Keep her there, Tom, God. Keep her there. Keep her there.
There, mate.
Ah.
Well done, fella.
Cheers, mate.
I think I might come back September then.
I see you walking, I thought,
At least I didn't come tomorrow. I'm going to be waiting for the car.
exactly.
Well done.
Cheers, mate.
Right, talk to me again, that's it. Right, you keep hold of her, mate. Go on, one more.
Ready?
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
You run away strong.
Oh, mate, what a workout.
Well done, mate.
Cheers, man.
Mate, what a result.
Thanks, bud.
Well done.
Mate, thank you so much for being here, mate. One guy, it'll be you, man, you know that. We good?
Oh, mate, we're good.
Cool, I'll tell you what.